Hi everyone, this is Stephen Wheeler and I am going to demonstrate how to paint a seamless gradient, sky gradient incorporating clouds. For those of you more familiar with painting terminology, this will be painting a cloudy sky with wet into wet techniques. So I'll show you a few of the tools that I'll probably be using today. So this is a hog bristle 1-inch brush. I'm painting 18 by 24 painting, so I'm covering a fair amount of ground. It might be good to have a larger brush, but I don't have that. And I have a 1/2-inch round. So this is also hog bristle. Hog bristles hold a lot of paint and are good for laying down a lot of color. This synthetic 1/2-inch flat, which might help to smooth out my gradient in an intermediate stage. And this is a Sobi Japanese ink brush. And this is, I don't know what this is, but these two brushes are soft, almost like makeup brushes. Not that I really know exactly what makeup brushes are like, but it's how they look anyway. And these I will use to make my gradient very smooth and take any of the lines out of the gradient transition. So what I've already done is I've worked in acrylic to create an underpainting. This is about 2 hours of work already done of a scene in Bombay Hook National Park. So you can see I have about 5 different shades of darker blues, and then going down to the horizon it's going to become much lighter. There's a touch of green in there. So I've used primarily cobalt blue, but I have adjusted it with a small amount of phthalo, small amount of dioxazine purple, a little bit of ultramarine, and a little bit of permanent green light. And then over to the side I have a number of paints that I will be using for my cloud gradients. So this is a string palette system where I have multiple colors mixed up in advance. So when I begin to paint, I can mix my final color right on the canvas. So you may have noticed that I already put in my tree drawings. I will be painting, basically just painting straight over top of those, working down to where they can be seen through, because I'll be painting thinly. I find this a lot easier than finishing the trees and labor intensively going through and masking them out. This is a system that works well for me. Yes, you have to do it twice, but I find that it frees me up to be much more direct in my painting methods, both in the first time that I lay the trees in, knowing that I'll be painting up to and around them, and in the second time when I go back, I have the established area where the tree is going to be. So I don't have to be as careful, and I don't have to worry as much about destroying the sky. Now here's where I bring in a very soft brush, and rather than worrying about these little lines and imperfections, I can eliminate them just by a nice kind of up and down circular motion. Gets rid of those brush strokes, glosses over any kind of problems or streakiness in the gradient. A tiny bit of medium, and I'll use a little paint thinner, but I want to make sure that I'm not actually applying paint thinner to the painting, because I'm just trying to keep this brush clean, so I'm not really moving color from one spot of the gradient to another. I'm simply eliminating the texture. If you bring a brush loaded with paint thinner up into the sky, you might find you're clearing away some of the underpainting or some white of the canvas, and that's probably not going to help your transitions. I'm really making this video for myself, especially myself a couple of years ago when I was first trying to paint some landscapes and skies and incorporate the clouds into it. They always seemed very separate, and I always was relatively comfortable painting the large forms of the clouds, but would freeze up in trying to establish the edges. So this again is where the feathery brushes come in trying to make those organic, uneven, fuzzy edges of the cloud. This is really nice to do in wet into wet because it can help to unify your cloud to the background sky. Some highlighted areas, it's nice to bring in some more opaque white to really separate from the texture of the canvas and bring in a highlighted area that feels like light is hitting it. I will caution that if you use pure white without using any kind of warmth, any yellow or red to modify it, you may find that it continues to sink to the same level because color temperature, in addition to the value of the color, makes a difference in how we perceive form. So to represent something as being closer to the sun or being turned towards the light, it's nice to use a warmer color. So I've clarified the drawing on many of these clouds. Perhaps you can see the distant clouds starting to take shape over on this half of the canvas. Just a couple of observations about how clouds work. The further up in the sky, the closer they are to the viewer, so there's going to be more of a divide of contrast. Why are those lines coming to? And then in the distance, not only is the contrast going to be reduced, but the value range will become much tighter while we're losing edges. So in the distance, one of the key things, not just making your clouds smaller because clouds vary in size a lot, but making sure that it becomes harder to distinguish at least the bottom of the cloud from the sky behind it. So your lights become slightly duller and your shadows become brighter, and those clouds become hazy and develop that atmospheric perspective, there being a lot of air between you and those clouds. It's also important that clouds that are higher up in the painting, higher up in the sky, you're looking up at those. So there's less of a, it's being applied in almost a one-point perspective, like you're looking up at the top of the hallway. So clouds will start up like this, and as they move down, level out and go away from you in kind of this swoop. So understanding how to position the bottom of the clouds, they can be almost vertical, high in the canvas, very much more horizontal towards the bottom, and that flattening will also make the perspective feel like they're moving into the distance. But now, because I have a lot of the drawing laid in, I'm bringing in some slightly purple shadows on some of these. As I said, making it very hazy. Now, some of what I'm doing right here will be covered over by the trees using this Sobe ink brush just to very softly feather this out. This is one of the ways that I'm basically dismantling the edges so these clouds will feel just a little out of focus, a little bit concealed from the viewer. So even if I could paint every detail on even the smallest clouds, the more small brush strokes that I put in the distance will make them seem more like small clouds than distant clouds. So we want these to feel like they're on the same scale. Maybe some of them might even be larger than the clouds up close. But through softly modeling the edges into the sky background, it's possible to create the illusion of depth through atmosphere. We want several miles between us and these clouds. There's still a vague sense of directional light, even in the very deep distance. We're going to see that shift from left to right. In this painting, the sun is coming from top left, kind of a mid-afternoon scene. Many painters and photographers gravitate towards the evening and the morning. The harsher sunlight of the midday has some very interesting visual possibilities, some interesting atmospheric possibilities. I'm doing a body of work that's kind of exploring that more bright, direct light. I do love the morning and late night for the drama, though. So you want to make sure that those soft edges are operating as distant clouds should operate. Now these clouds on this side are a little closer to us, so we can maintain a slightly harder edge. And the texture of the canvas, when you get the texture of the paint on it right, is not particularly distracting in person. You may notice it a little more on the video. And it's an important distinction here on top that this is not just value but temperature that is putting light on these clouds. This is about an hour and a half of painting. This is how a painter that's done a handful of skies works. If anybody has any comments on how to improve these techniques or where to find other ways to paint clouds with wet into wet oil techniques, just leave it in the comments below. Let me know. Stephen Wheeler signing off.